welcome to another episode of the Reverse Mentor Lab,
where we engage with thinkers from around the world to explore how leaders of today can learn from leaders of tomorrow.
You're back with your hosts. I'm Joshua.
And I'm Jan.
Today's guest is a creative thinker and the co-founder of a business called Creativity Wake Up. She's based in South Africa but has connections right around the world. Her name is Nina Pearse. I'm sure that you'll enjoy today's conversation as we explore the creativity gap.
Hello, Nina. Welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
Very, very well. Thank you, Jens. Thank you for having me on today.
Great to have you. So, Josh, take us away.
Yeah, well, maybe to kick things off, it's another episode of the Reverse Mentor Lab, and we've got another fellow South African on the call. So Jens joked before we started recording that he needs to get a German on, but Nina's got a story about that for us. But Nina, lovely to have you with us, and thanks so much for your time. And I know you're passionate about creativity. And so maybe to kick off this whole conversation and the podcast recording, tell us a bit about yourself. What's your story?
So thank you, Josh. My name is Nina. I'm from SA, born and bred, grew up in Joburg and absolutely love the city, which we like to call the Big Nachi. And yeah, I'm in training and development, and I've started a company called Creativity Wake Up, which I'll tell you about. But yeah, my field is really in people development. That's what I do.
Cool. Well, it's awesome to have you with us, Nina. And I know that, like I said in the introduction, you're super passionate about creativity. And so maybe you can tell us a bit about what sparked that creative or spark inside of you, and how you I know you've done a lot of work in the consulting world and you've spent some time as a management consultant, but what was it really about creativity and learning that sparked the intention to start Creativity Wake Up?
So Josh, I come from a home where my father, his father is German, and he was always very strict about thinking within the box. He wanted us all to go down a straight path to work in one company, and to follow the way that everyone else is going. My mother, on the other hand, was incredibly creative, but yet in our home we had our roles. I was going to be the doctor, and my big sister was going to be the accountant, and our middle sister was the creative one. She did art and drama, and my father always sort of said that this was arty-farty and it wasn't really real, and as it wasn't a real thing to do when you grow up. And as many of us might have been told, the BA, the Bachelor of Arts degree, used to be known as bugger all, actually, and you actually had to do a real degree, and that had to be something in finance or tech or commerce, and that was just how we grew up. At school, creativity wasn't really encouraged, and you really had to do something real that would earn you money. And so I went into a field of business finance. I was going to become an accountant, and then at the last minute pulled out because I realized that just really wasn't going to be me. Although I absolutely loved maths, accounting was hard for me. And I decided what I actually wanted to do was go into teaching, but I decided not to go into teaching children, but go into corporate training. So having done a Bachelor of Business Science, I went into corporate training and did quite a lot of work in banks, and then went into management consulting. But all along, I had this deep desire to express creativity, and I knew that I had it within me, but I just didn't know how. While I was working, at some point, I was given a book by my sister called The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's now become quite a seminal book. And in this book, Julia starts off by teaching artists, and then eventually teaches everyone how to unblock creativity. And it started out as a workshop, and then people begged her to please put it into a book, and it's gone around the world and become quite an important work. But it took quite a few years for me to get to the point where I really understood more about creative thinking. I had been working in leadership development for a while, and was part of many programs where we chatted to leaders about how to innovate. And there were tools, and there were processes, and there were ways of innovating. But to me, there was something missing. There was this creative thinking required behind the innovation. So you come to a session, you try to ideate, and people are drawing on what? And the analogy that came to me that we use often now in our training is if this innovation you're doing at work is the game of football on the field, you need to know the strategies, you need to know the different players, you need to know the game. But if each player is not physically fit, they're not going to play that game very well. And so I see creativity and creative thinking, my own personal creativity, as my physical fitness that I bring to the field of innovation and creative work that I'm doing at work in my business. And it's interesting because I don't know about you guys, but this idea, creativity, has so closely been linked with artistry, as I was saying, in my own family, that it's almost a swear word I find in businesses. And even when we named our business Creativity Wake Up, I had advice from some people. Oh, no, businesses aren't going to want to take that on. You need a different name. It needs to have innovation or something in your name. And we did really consider that, but we just feel like we have to do more education about what creativity is and this creative intelligence, and that it's not just for actors and painters and dancers. It is for engineers and scientists and CEOs, and all of us need to learn to tap into our creative thinking. So actually it was, in terms of how we were founded, it actually took quite a big medical emergency for me to get out of my fear and my inhibition, to my holding myself back from starting this business. I'd always worked in corporate, and in 2014 they discovered a huge tumor in my chest, and after years of pain, I was so happy that this had been found, and I had to go and have open heart surgery. And it's kind of one of those moments where the surgeon said it was very bad. When they opened me up, this tumor was the size of a large orange. It had grown onto my heart and into my lungs, and it was in those days in hospital that I thought, what am I waiting for? I loved my corporate work, but I had this desire that I needed to break out and do this work, and it was a very tough thing. But it was that sort of life-changing moment for me that gave me the energy and the confidence to say, this is not a dress rehearsal, Nina, go and do it. And so not long after I recovered from that, my sister and I, who is the architect artist, we founded this business together. So I bring my business and finance background. She brings her design thinking and art and architecture background. And we founded Creativity Wake Up to help businesses and individuals to close that gap and understand more about their creativity.
Love that story. Thanks for telling it. I would like to double click on a couple of things. One, of course, how did you get to the name of Creative Wake Up? And then as well, looking into the big corporations in this world, like you said, creativity is not really something they're writing all over. So I would like to first go into how you decided for the name, and then we go into the corporate world a little bit.
Thank you, Jens. And we don't want to offend people by using the word wake up, because it sort of implies that you're asleep. So, but we feel that because there's such a need for this creativity revolution, we wanted to be a little bit strong in that name. So the name actually comes from a creative muse of mine whose name is Sark. She comes from San Francisco, and she's actually got an amazing story herself. She had a very tough childhood and had to use her imagination to cope. She wrote a beautiful poster that then went around the world. It became as viral as a poster could go in 1989, called How to Be an Artist. And it was this, I came across this poster while I was at school, and I'd never in my life come across an adult who enabled people to be so free. Look up that poster, I recommend it. And she's since written many books teaching people to tap into their creativity. In one of her books, which I think is called Creativity Sandwich, she explains how as a child her very first job was as a wake-up fairy at nursery school, and she had to go around with a little wand and wake up the children after their afternoon nap. And she talks about these roles and different jobs that we have in our life. And she was the wake up fairy, and that really inspired me. And so I had this sort of idea of us as wake up fairies, reminding people how incredible they are and waking them up to this huge power of creative intelligence that can be developed like any muscle.
So if we take that analogy, how do you wake up corporations?
Thank you. So with difficulty. So it starts, we've developed a process that always starts with the individual. We start with individuals, and then we move to teams, and then we move to leaders. It's very important to get to the leaders. And I know when change programs happen, I've worked in change management, and a lot of times you'll start with the leaders. We will start with leaders to get their buy-in, but they also, as individuals, have to start with themselves. And we've developed a process where we help people think about creativity like a treasured, buried lamp. So if you imagine an Aladdin's lamp, it is this ability that all of us have. And we've developed a process that helps people to dig the lamp out, is the step one. So in that step, we look at helping people understand, and this would be through a series of workshops and trainings and engagements. What is creativity? What do I understand about it? What is the neuroscience behind it? I'm part of the Neuro Leadership Institute, founded in New York and based, they have a business here in South Africa as well. And we look at the neuroscience of this, and how Celia and I also go into a lot of the research and read a lot of what's being written about creativity and the brain. So we help people understand that and dig out what influenced me over time, and what do I believe, and test my creativity, how creative is my thinking now, etc. Step two is to clean off the lamp. So we've got it out, but there's all mud caked over it, and we've got to clean it off. So we look at what stops my creativity, and there are a lot of different things. They're general things like busyness, fear, etc. We have personality-based things, and we do some personality training with people to help them understand what stops them based on their personality. And then there are digital things like digital distraction, digital overload, digital deduction, giving your thinking over to the internet. And that sort of stuff kills our creativity. The third step is to then fill it up. We've got this lamp, it needs oil, and we need to develop good habits in our daily lives to teach us to build creativity. So we look at what do great creative thinkers do? What have great creative thinkers done in the past? And we look at the lives of real creative scientists and artists and business developers that we can draw from, and we look at how to develop habits. And then finally, the third step is light, and that is all about taking action. Often we forget, we think creativity is just ideas, but creativity has this verb create in the middle of it. It's very, very practical. And I think you will know this, Jens, in your innovation, and Josh as well. Innovators, it's all about iterating, taking action, doing things, moving to your minimum viable product straight away. And so we do this and say in the third step, what are the things you're going to do, where you're going to apply your creativity, and also help to reconnect people with creative passions that they've had since they were young, that they've often forgotten about. And if you think right now, and if your listeners think right now back to those things that spark joy in them, how many of those things have you pushed down because there's no time, you're looking after kids, you've got to run your business, what's that got to do with anything? And so we help people to take steps to reconnect with those things, because guess what? Not only do they bring energy to us, motivate us, help us keep going and keep our mental well-being, but they also help us to solve problems. So for example, you had a hobby or a desire or a love of tinkering with cars or taking apart radios. When we allow ourselves the creative freedom to do that, and we build those things into our lives, and we make time for them, we then learn from that, grow from that, and can use those problem-solving skills in that area with in other areas. So that's what we would do with individuals, and then there's lots more we would then go and do with teams and with leaders. But that I think would be a good starting point.
That process and just the way that you described it, Nina, something that I just want to take a bit further is you mentioned around neuroscience and actually understanding the brain and how that sort of those connections inside our neurology can actually enhance or make us not aware of our creativity. So I think one of the biggest things is I'm sitting here inside of the call today as the young thinker, like Jens and I refer to it as, so young professionals going into the working world. How can young thinkers enhance their creativity? What are some of the creative practices that they can look to tap into to basically prioritize in their day-to-day to enhance and establish better creative practices to better think through things?
Josh, well, I think we've built a model that I hope will help explain some of this, where we say the base of your creative development is your creative mindset. And we've identified 8 things that go into that mindset. And we really need to start with those things. Those are like our basic fitness. Then onto that, we build creative thinking skills. And we've also identified 8 there. And then we build the tools on top. So if I just start with some of the mindsets that can really help you as a young creative thinker, one of the very key ones is curiosity. And so if you can remain curious, you can really help develop your creativity. So there are things that you can ask yourself. Do you wonder about how things work? Do you wonder about why people behave in a certain way? Do you wonder about what's behind what you see? And try to ask more questions. Children are incredibly creative, they're incredibly curious, and we need to learn from them. As we get older, we think we know things, we stop asking as many questions. So there's another way of thinking about it is it's called the beginner's mindset. When we have a beginner's mindset, we definitely increase our creativity. So just by asking questions and figuring out, and also asking questions like what if, very, very powerful things to drive. What if things were different? What if there was, for example, a better way forward for our country? If we look at what's happening in South Africa, creative thinkers will see possibility. And so starting by asking more questions, better questions, and seeking out people who are asking good questions and spending time with them, that's a great way of developing your creative thinking. Another key mindset is humor. And this is something we have been working on so much with our community and putting out in our communications that we've been putting out, especially when times are so tough. We need to be not taking ourselves so seriously. And we can see from brain science, when our brains are flooded with cortisol and adrenaline, they do shut down more. If we can keep things light, we get that dopamine and that oxytocin going in our brain, it physically and biologically enables our brain to make more association. So I think to be able to maintain lightness of being, watch some comedy, and not to diminish the importance or the seriousness of things that are going around us, but all too often we can take ourselves too seriously, and we can really lose creativity there.
Yeah, specifically in the corporate world, because it depends a little bit on the culture. I've been working in different countries and different cultures. Some cultures are just not like the most humor-driven cultures. Not to say that's the Germans, but maybe they are. What I would like to look into is, do you see a difference from your corporate engagement of people who are younger and people who are very, very senior in organization? Is there a difference when it goes into creativity and how they work with creative thinkings?
Yes, there is a difference. So And not hugely, but we've had retirees actually, even on some of our public courses, and it's like the retirees get to this stage where they open up again. They don't care what people think anymore, and it's like they have this creativity blossom again. And certainly I think the younger people haven't had so much of that heaviness on them yet. So with some very senior managers, we do see people who have the weight of the world on their shoulders, and they've seen it. They say, we've been there, we've seen that, we've done that, and you know, this is not going to work. So it's harder, I find, to work with some of the older, but it's a very big generalization, because you know, individuals are different. And I have also seen some young people who already have got so iced in. So one of the, we love using analogies, hence the analogy of our process with the lamp. But analogies help us to remember, and stories are a very, very powerful way to learn. So another analogy we use is one of a ship going through ice. And when that ice freezes up, that ship just can't move. And I've seen some young people who are already so frozen up with a lot of worries and cares. You know, we have some young people in our country who are looking after their parents, you know, their whole community. They might be one of the only people with a job, and they have the weight of the world on them already at such a young age. So yeah, it's with some of them, they have frozen up already.
Yeah, Nina, and I want to just go back to something that you mentioned, and my mind's been running a bit since you mentioned it, around thinking differently and using creativity to help you do that. And I can remember the first time that I met you in Celia, when you were just starting on this journey around Creativity Wake Up, and you gave me a business card that was actually a pen. And it wasn't just any ordinary pen. And I think if you think about just a mindset shift, especially what you've just been talking about now in terms of different generations, how something as simple as doing a simple business card differently to a traditional business card can immediately start to ask different questions, but also to frame the way that you interact with people slightly differently. And the other element, before I ask you the question, is just to say around how you challenge creativity and what the specific meaning and definition of it is. And when I first met you in Celia again, I said, hey, hang on, I'm not creative. You know, my sister's the creative one in my family. She's the artist. She's the one that can draw. I don't have a creative brain. And you and Celia both looked at me with big wide eyes, and you said, why do you think that? And I didn't first internalize that, but having now reflected on it a bit, I get why you guys said that inside of that space. And maybe to now ask you the question in terms of saying, how do we go about getting people to see creative talent and think about creativity differently to ways that have been taught to inside formal educational structures?
Yeah, it's a big question, Josh, and it's a big piece of work. And I'm so grateful for my business partner, Celia Falkenberg, who has come out of this different space that I have, and that she brings so much fresh thinking and helps me challenge things all the time. But it is a big work we need to do. I first just want to say that we mustn't feel bad that we don't feel that we're creative, that this has become a common phrase. I don't have a creative bone in my body, and it's always linked with I can't draw a stick figure, because that is how our education system in the West has developed us. It's been the society. It's the way the Industrial Revolution wanted to create you know, the types of workers that it needed. And so Ken Robinson so beautifully put that in his famous TED Talk, which I think is the most watched TED Talk. So it shows it resonated with people. So first of all, don't feel bad that that's where you are, but how can we change this, is your question. And I guess it's through you know, trying to think about it differently. So for groups like Creativity Wake Up, organizations like ours, and there are many who are starting to work on it, helping to change the reputation and the understanding of creativity out there. We're very grateful to the Creative Problem Solving Institute based in New York State, where we are learning a lot, and they are doing a lot to promote understanding about creativity. And then we're seeing it come out of big organizations as well. For example, LinkedIn put out a report last year already, I think, their workplace needs report, and creativity was the #1 soft skill in demand off their platform. And that's, as I understand, not research. It's literally what is it's data coming out of their 30 million organizations and 700 million users on their site. So creativity being the #1 there. And then we've seen it come out of the World Economic Forum. We've seen it come out of many leaders name creativity as a real skill that's needed. So I think it's about getting out there into social media, into the space, and podcasts like this where we can talk about it and help people understand your creative intelligence is built into your brain, and it is something that we can work on to develop. Our brains are designed, just as they're designed for creativity, they are also designed to conserve energy. So we typically will, and they're designed to have a bigger response to threat than to reward. And for those reasons, creativity is hard, because creativity requires us to push out into the unknown, to experiment, to do something new, which is always a threat. So it is kind of going against part of our brain that's designed to keep us safe, but we must push out, because we have a society that has taught us, be comfortable. It's all about you, it's all about your comfort. And so many voices are now starting to say, we need to push out of our comfort zones, people. And I love the new, well, not so new, but over the last few years, the movement of stoicism that's been coming back, led by people like Nina Pearse, talking about actually all the magic happens outside our comfort zone, and we need to take ice baths and do hard things, and creativity is definitely part of that.
Yeah, and it's quite interesting that you said that, because Joshua and I talked on the podcast as well, that it's like sometimes it's just the perspective of, hey, we need to fit into the bigger environment where we are in, and because we kind of feel the pressure of fitting in, then you're not using your creativity. And another part to that is you need to have the space to unleash the creativity as well. If you're just busy every day and doing your task at work, if we talk about the corporate setting, you're just not creative, because your mind is not going into that flow state. It's not going into the space where you allow creativity to come through. And I see this just with myself. If I'm too busy, then the good ideas are not coming. You think you sit down, it's like it's not coming, and then you go out for a run and they come. There's an idea, there's an idea, and then it flows. Yeah, it's super interesting to dive even deeper into that, because for me, specifically in the corporate world, it's like you said, it's not enough, and we all can do it. We just need to have the space. And corporate leaders, if we go towards the experienced thinkers, they need to give people the opportunity and the space of leveraging their creativity and sparking it again.
Absolutely, Jens. I'm so glad you brought it up. And there's so much for us to talk about. I think we could be all day. But I want to recommend an incredible book by a South African psychologist who's actually based at Harvard, called Dr. Nina Pearse, and it's called Tinker, Dabble, Doodle, Try. And in it, he talks about the power of unfocus. So in neuroscience terms, we'll talk about how our the thoughts of what we're doing are in our prefrontal cortex, and we can only hold 3 or 4 or 5 of them at a time. But the real power in our default mode network is where the problems can be solved, where our brain operates at a much faster pace. And what we normally do is focus, sleep. And our day should look like focus, unfocus, focus, unfocus, focus, unfocus, sleep. And it's about how do we build this thinking time. Also, Juliet Funt talks about it as white space. How do we build white space into our businesses and value it, and value that thinking time, without thinking we have to be on this constant treadmill where we're not being as smart and working as smart because we haven't drawn on that powerful thinking to guide what we do.
Yeah, I really love the word white space, and I think, like you said, we can definitely go down a few rabbit holes. So we'll have to have you and Celia back. And I know I'll have to, between the three of you and Jens, it'll be quite a fascinating conversation. But I'm going to be respectful of your time, and you've already shared a large part of your story. And so thank you for being so open and honest about that and really giving us some key takeaways. I know Jens and I have been frantically scribbling notes for those who aren't watching the podcast on YouTube, because it's really got our minds running around creativity. And sort of to maybe transition to sort of close out the conversation is something that we're developing inside of the Reverse Mentor Lab is asking our guests to share a little bit of a challenge at the end of the episode, whether that's an inspiration or a call to action. So Nina, I'm going to give the mic back to you and ask you to tee up a challenge for the listeners and anyone that's watching this.
Thank you. So I would love to challenge you as listeners to think about your creative intelligence differently, and to think about what could be hindering your creative intelligence. We have a little quiz on our website called the Creativity Killers Quiz, and it is based on personality, and it's just one tiny part of this whole big picture, but it might give you a little bit of insight and a little bit of a push to think about what could be holding back your creativity, your creative intelligence. So if you could go and take that quiz, it's on creativitywakeup.com. I'm sure the guys will put a link in the bio, and it will take you only a couple of minutes to complete, but I hope will be helpful to when you've finished it, you'll get a couple of hints and helps as to how to overcome those creativity killers.
That's a great one. Love that. So everyone who is listening or watching, we put the link into the show notes, and we would love you to take that quiz. Nina, Josh, go on.
Jens, I just wanted to say I also love the call to action and sort of the inspiration that you've left us with, Nina. And I think really going back to sort of the naming of Creativity Wake Up, you've definitely awoken Jens and my creativity on this morning recording, yet alone us being so far apart and connecting through Zoom. And I think that we look forward to seeing how you guys grow from a business perspective, and also the dots that you connect, like Jens likes to say, with creativity, and encouraging people to embrace their creativity and also to close that creativity gap. So thanks so much again for your time. And Jens, I'll hand over to you just to round off the conversation.
Thanks, Josh. So last part, where can people find you and how can people follow you on social, wherever?
Thank you. So we are on creativitywakeup.com, and you can find us on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on Facebook, and we'll provide all those links for you down below.
Thank you, Nina. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast, and looking forward to maybe have a second session or a third even going forward. Thanks a lot. It was
Wonderful.
a pleasure.
We'd love that. Thank you.
Thanks for listening and joining us on the journey that is the Reverse Mentor Lab. If anything fascinated you in the discussion that we had today, you're welcome to set up a 15-minute coffee chat with us. Our emails are in the show notes, and you can also connect with us on our website, thexyzplayground.com.